Hello, my brothers and sisters. It is the 10th of April, 2026. And on the early Bali calendar, it is the 21st of Aviv. So I just wanted to share something with you that happened this morning. Do you remember in my podcast about the little donkey and how Jesus had issued a decree, loose him and bring him to me? And that was a statement that carried such authority that nobody could deny it. What he said came. The little colt and mother had been tied up for who knows how long at that place where the paths meet. But when Jesus said, loose him and bring him to me, even the person who was the legitimate owner of the donkey had to let it go because Jesus had need of him. So this morning, I was standing at my kitchen window looking out, and I'm sure I've mentioned before that there is a railway line that passes behind my back wall. My back wall is very high, about 9 foot high, so I cannot see the railway line, but I can see the top half of the trains as they pass by. And I always take a note of the number on the train, and usually the number is 3201. However, this morning, as the train pulled to a stop at the station which is round the corner from my house, there was the number displayed on the train, and it was not 3201, it was number 400. So I immediately took note of that number because it was so out of the ordinary. I've been watching those train numbers day in, day out, week in, week out, and suddenly there was number 400. So I went to look up the meaning of the number 400 in the Strong's Concordance. And G400 is anaphoneo. It means to cry out with a loud voice. And it comes from two different Greek words, G303 and G5455. The first word, ana, means among or in the midst. So this crying out with a loud voice is among people or in the midst of a crowd of people. The second word it comes from is phoneo, which means to sound, to call, to send for, to summon, and to call out of. In other words, to bid someone to quit the place where they are and come to one. It also means a cock crow. So immediately with all those meanings that are wrapped up and the foundation of the word anaphoneo, to cry out with a loud voice, I immediately thought of the scripture in Matthew 25:6, which says, there is a loud cry, behold, the bridegroom comes, go out to meet him. And as we read that story, we see that those who were ready, who were the wise ones, because they had extra oil, went out to meet him. The ones who had been foolish and not stored up enough oil had to go and buy oil. And those who were ready went in, and the door was shut. So this loud cry was in the midst of the sleeping virgins with their lamps. Matthew 25 verse 1 says they had gone out to meet him of their own accord before the cry happened. They had started the journey. But because he was so long in coming and took much longer than they expected, they had sat down by the side of the road and fallen asleep. Now, the interesting thing is that word phoneo, which means a sound, a cry, a summons, also means cock crow. So now that's very interesting, because immediately you start thinking about Peter, who denied the Lord 3 times, and then the cock crew. So in Mark 13 verse 35, it speaks about, let's just go there. It speaks about, Jesus is telling them a parable about the coming of the Son of Man. First of all, in 24, he speaks about tribulation, and the sun is darkened, the moon doesn't give her light, the stars of the heavens fall. And then a bit further on, he tells a parable. In verse 32 it begins, "We don't know the day or the hour when the bridegroom is coming. Only the Father knows." And it says in verse 33, "Watch and pray, because you do not know when the time is." And then he tells a story about a man taking a far journey, who gave authority to his servants, and to every man he gave work, and he commanded the watchman to watch, the doorkeeper actually, to watch, because you do not know when the master is coming back. And in verse 35 it says, "At evening, or at midnight, or at cock crowing, or in the morning." Well, those 4 things are actually the names of the 4 watches of the night. And that word cock crowing is G219, and it actually means the 3rd watch of the night. And what used to happen was, at the end of each watch of the night, a trumpet used to be blown in 2 different directions to announce the end of that watch and the beginning of another. So when Jesus said to Peter, "Before the cock crows twice," which is recorded in Mark 14 verse 30, "you will have denied me 3 times." He's talking about the trumpet sound, the cock crow at 3 a.m., the end of the 3rd watch of the night. Isn't that interesting? So it's not a rooster. Roosters were not allowed in the temple precinct. So with a great cry, the virgins are loosed from sleep and called to go out to encounter. The word meet means encounter the bridegroom. With a great decree, Jesus said, "Loose him and bring him to me." The colt was loosed from that rope and brought to Jesus. So we see a similarity in those 2 events. What brings the virgins to the bridegroom? It is the sound, the proclamation that is made that he is on his way. And it says in Matthew 25 that they trimmed their lamps. The wise trimmed their lamps, which means they cut off all the dead, burnt part of the wick and pulled through more fresh wick so that it could be lit again. But the unwise virgins' lamps had gone out because there was not enough oil. And they tried to skive some off the wise virgins, and they said, "No, we don't know how long the journey is till we come face to face, and so there might not be enough for both of us." And they was told to go and buy. So at that cry, that proclamation that went out, there was an announcement that a face-to-face encounter was coming. This is what they had been waiting for. And the power of that cry gave them the impetus they needed to move forward with determined purpose and focus. Now the Lord reminded me that there was another proclamation that was made. In Ezra 1 verse 1, Cyrus, it says the Spirit of the Lord stirred up Cyrus. That word stirred up in the Hebrew means to awaken. Just like the virgins were awakened, Cyrus's spirit was awakened by the Spirit of the Lord. And he made a proclamation that those who wanted to go back and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem were to be released to do so, and all provision they needed for the journey must be supplied. Now the word proclamation in Ezra 1:1 is two words, abar and kol. Abar means transition or to cross over, and kol is a sound or a loud cry. So an abar kol, a transition cry, carrying authority and power and provision within it, was released. And it also says that Cyrus had it written down in a document, in a scroll, that everything that was needed for those who were beginning this journey must be supplied. Now, it's the same with the Israelites. When they left Egypt, when the destroyer passed over at midnight and a great cry and wailing was released throughout the whole land of Egypt, that cry was their signal to go out to meet God at Mount Sinai. And everything they needed was supplied for that journey. God gave them shade from the heat of the day in the wilderness with the pillar of cloud. He gave them warmth at night and the ability to see if they were still walking at night with the pillar of fire. He gave them manna daily. The bitter water was turned sweet. And later on the rock was split and more water. Everything they needed was supplied for their journey to Mount Sinai. In the same way, beloved, those who go out to meet the bridegroom, who come out of the world system to meet the bridegroom, they launch forth on that journey. Heaven will supply your every need. Do not worry about that. You do not have to rely on the slave rations of the world system any longer. The God who has the power to issue an abar kol, the power to issue a proclamation that contains authority and power for provision and safe passage, has issued a cry over the wise virgins. Go out to meet him. He's on his way. Now it says in Matthew 25 that when the foolish virgins came, the door was shut. So the shut door indicates a sealing off and a separation between the unwise and the wise. And I spoke to you before about how the oil represents intimacy and communion with the Lord, because he knew the wise virgins because of their wise choices to spend much time with him. He did not know the foolish virgins and he would not let them in. Now, in order to fully understand this parable, you have to understand the ancient Israeli practices involved in a marriage. When this cry, the bridegroom go out to meet him, occurred, and they went with the bridegroom, he was taking them to the chamber he prepared in his father's house. And the bridegroom, the bride, and their attendants enjoyed a private banquet in the middle of the night. This was not the wedding under the chuppah where you say the vows in front of witnesses. This was a private wedding supper in the middle of the night in the space that had been prepared for them. And then towards the end of the morning watch, the bride would go and do her bridal mikveh, or her cleansing bath, separating her unto the bridegroom. And then the public wedding under the chuppah with the guests would take place. So the story of the wise and the foolish virgins is not referring to the wedding under the chuppah before a watching guest list. It's referring to the first part of the process unto full union, which was the face-to-face encounter with the bridegroom, the feasting privately in a sealed-in protected place with the bridegroom and the bride's attendants and the friend of the bridegroom, knowing that later on the big public wedding would take place. So we see that the cry, the bridegroom is on his way, go out to meet him, is the cry that launches a sifting and a separation and a revealing of the wise and the unwise. They were all waiting for the bridegroom, but they were a mixed multitude. And when that cry came, like the cry of G400, a loud cry in the midst. What did it say? Let me just find my notes here. That word phoneo is to call, to send for, and to summon. Jesus called for the colt. He summoned and sent for the colt. It also means to call out of, to tell someone to quit one place and come to you. So the call that said, the bridegroom comes, go out to meet him, was the call that said, awaken from the place of sleep and move forward with purpose and passion towards your face-to-face encounter with the bridegroom. Let me see what else my notes say. The ready ones become the sealed in ones. Now in Revelation 7, the angels who hold back the four winds are told, don't hurt the earth or the sea until we have sealed the bondservants of God on their foreheads. And Revelation 14 says that the Father's name and the Son's name were on the foreheads of the 144,000, and they were positioned on the heavenly Mount Zion. Psalm 2 speaks of the kings of the earth banding together against God and his Messiah, and saying we're going to throw off their bonds. And God laughs because he says he has already set his king in place on Mount Zion. That word set means anointed, which tells you that the king has been newly installed. It's talking about the fact that at the time that the kings of the earth are banding together against God and his Messiah, which is his son, God is anointing a corporate kingly company and positioning them on Mount Zion. These are the 144,000. When a king was anointed and the oil poured round the crown of his head, that was a sealing unto kingship, a sealing unto a ruling and governmental position. This is both a place of protection, a place of provision, and a place of governmental authority. In Psalm 110, it says, extend your scepter from Zion, rule in the midst of your foes. Now, what is his scepter? His scepter, or his ruling rod, is this kingly company who have been set in place on Mount Zion to take over their Father's business. This is the reasoning for the calling to go out to meet him, because that face-to-face encounter is the beginning of the process of full union. So I want to say to you, beloved, who are waiting for the coming of the bridegroom, this morning the Lord emphasized the message he gave about the colt. The Lord is issuing a proclamation, a decree, for you to come out of the place where you've been. Spiritually, maybe physically, I don't know what your circumstances are, but go out to meet him with fresh passion, purpose, and focus, because full union is on the way. I said to you before that in Matthew 25, all 10 virgins went out to meet him with their lamps. Then they fell asleep, and then they were awakened by the cry at midnight, and then they trimmed their lamps, and there was the separation between the wise and the foolish. So we see the same with the Israelites in Egypt. When there was that cry at midnight, they came out with their unrisen bread dough in cloths on their heads, and they walked for 6 days until they hit the Red Sea. And then God made a way where there seemed to be no way, because he had called them to go out to worship him in the wilderness. And the seemingly impenetrable, impassable barrier of the Red Sea was split wide open, and they moved through. That night, when the east wind blew all that night, and in the morning watch, God looked down on the pursuing hordes of the Egyptian army and made it very difficult for them, and then told Moses to close the sea with his hand stretched out over it. That was an awakening for the people of God, who seemed to have lost faith when they hit the Red Sea. But when God opened the way for them to move forward with fixed purpose toward their face-to-face appointment at Mount Sinai, at Shavuot for the wedding, that renewed faith in them. They were awake and alert. You try walking through a sea that has been opened by a strong east wind blowing. It must have been quite an experience. They didn't just walk across a lovely earth bridge in the sea on a calm night. The wind was howling. The wind was howling. In the same way, whatever ends up in your path, stopping you from fully going out to meet him in this face-to-face encounter for full union, God will make a way where there seems to be no way. And today, the 21st of Aviv, in the early Bali calendar, is the day that they crossed over the Red Sea. It is the 7th day of unleavened bread. And then they were separated unto him in the wilderness, and reliant totally on his protection and his provision and his guidance. So God is emphasizing with that G400 that the cock's crow time, the 3 a.m. time, is coming up. During that midnight watch when Jesus' trial and everything had started, from 12 a.m. to 3 a.m., It was during that time that Peter denied Jesus 3 times. We are going to see a great increase in the denying and turning away from the Lord in this short period of time before we come to our place of face-to-face encounter and full union. Be aware of that. It might be the person who sleeps next to you in your bed. It might be members of your family. It might be your best friend. There's a great falling away and a denying of Jesus or any connection to Jesus in order to save their own skins, just as Peter did. But you, beloved, look on straight forward with fixed purpose. Do not look to the right nor to the left, but arise, trim your lamps, and go out to meet him. May the Lord bless you, and may he increase and add to the revelation and the confirmation that I've been sharing with you. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Awaken, awaken, the bridegroom is here. Arise from the dust, for he now appears. Trim well your lamps, cast the old now away. Hope becomes sight, it's the season of joy. Arise now and shine, for the glory is here. Sevenfold light is burning within. Arise now and shine, for his glory is here. All of the Godhead is dwelling within. He comes to be glorified in all who believe. Let all that's within you awaken and sing. I arise now and shine, for the glory is here. Sevenfold light is burning within. I arise now and shine, for your glory is here. All of the Godhead is dwelling within. I awaken, awaken, my bridegroom is here. I rise from the dust, for you now appear. I am trimming my lamp, casting old things away. Hope is now sight, it's the season of joy. I arise now and shine, for the glory is here. Sevenfold light is burning within. I arise now and shine, for your glory is here. All of the Godhead is dwelling within. I've oil in my lamp, for I stored some away. Fan now my flame till I'm fully ablaze. You come to be glorified in all who believe. Let all that's within me awaken and sing. You will not rest till our brightness goes forth. Hold not your peace till all is fulfilled. I awaken, awaken, my bridegroom is here. dwelling within.